I stood at the edge of my son's neighborhood in Queens, clutching a neatly boxed birthday cake, shivering as the February wind whipped down the street like a blade. The New York air cut straight through my scarf, so I tugged it tighter around my neck. Today was my grandson Ben's 5th birthday. We'd made plans last week to celebrate together. I'd even gone all the way to that boutique bakery in Brooklyn to get him his favorite superhero cake, hoping to surprise him. But I'd been standing there for nearly 30 minutes making call after call, more than a dozen in total, and no one had picked up. Adrian had told me earlier that he was suddenly being sent out of town for work. My daughter-in-law Caroline hadn't answered at all. Her phone had been off from the start. I'd rung the doorbell once, twice, then a third time. Nothing. Still clinging to hope, I called Adrian again. This time he finally answered, but his voice was as cold and sharp as the wind. "Mom, I told you, I'm out of town for work. I'm not in New York right now. Please stop calling, okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady, though a quiet unease was already spreading through me. "What about Caroline?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, touched with confusion and hurt. "Why isn't she answering? Why won't anyone open the door?" There was a pause on the other end, just a few seconds but long enough to hurt. Then he replied, his tone detached, almost robotic. "She's probably busy. Mom, it's just a kid's birthday. You don't need to be at every single one. Please stop bothering them." I tightened my grip on the phone, knuckles turning pale. My grandson. My sweet little Ben, the child I'd longed for and cherished for 5 years. And I wasn't even allowed to be at his birthday? The wind kept blowing, cutting across my cheeks, but I couldn't move. My mind was spinning. Caroline had never been warm toward me, but she'd always kept up appearances. Today, though, the silence behind that door felt deliberate, like I had suddenly become an unwanted guest. A stranger. I looked down at the cake box in my hands. My breath rose in pale clouds, drifting away with the wind, and something in my chest ached deep. My name is Bridget Dawson. I'm 66 years old. I worked over 2 decades in a government finance office before retiring. My husband passed away young, cancer, when Adrian was still in school. I raised him on my own. Adrian was a good kid. Quiet, smart, never gave me trouble. He earned a scholarship, graduated into a solid job, and eventually met Caroline. They got married and had Ben not long after. At first, I had no complaints about Caroline. My son had chosen her and I just wanted him to be happy. But over time I started to notice, Caroline never really welcomed me. It began with small things. I'd stop by to help tidy up and she'd stiffen, point out how I'd moved something or complain that my cooking was too heavy and didn't fit their clean eating lifestyle. When I offered to help with Ben's school runs, she politely declined, saying they had a nanny and everything was covered. I'm not someone who imposes. If they didn't want me involved, I took a step back. So I scaled things down, just gifts on holidays and birthdays, no unannounced visits. Still, I could feel her aversion. It wasn't subtle. It came from somewhere deeper. Last year, when I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, Adrian only visited me only. Caroline didn't show up once. And yes, it hurt. But I told myself Adrian has his own family now. I couldn't expect more. I couldn't be a burden. But today was different. Today was Ben's birthday. I had reminded Adrian about it a week ago, hoping we could celebrate as a family. He had said, "Of course, Mom. You're so thoughtful." And now, this. A last-minute business trip, a locked door, and complete silence from Caroline. No explanation. Not even a token excuse. That's when it hit me. Maybe they just didn't want me there at all. Standing in the cold, the wind biting through my coat, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Carol Benson, who lived just down the street. Her grandson went to the same preschool as Ben. The call connected quickly, her warm and familiar voice cutting through the icy air. "Bridget? Everything okay?" I hesitated, then asked, trying to keep my voice light, "Do you know if the preschool had any events today? It's Ben's birthday, but I haven't been able to reach Caroline. No one's answering the door either." There was a pause. Just long enough to make my heart start racing. Then Carol's voice returned, quieter now, more tentative. "Bridget, you didn't know?" A chill prickled down my spine. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Know what?" She took a breath, like she was choosing her words carefully, and then said softly, "I saw Adrian at the preschool this afternoon. He picked Ben up himself." I froze. Everything around me, the wind, the noise, the ache in my hands, faded into silence. All I could hear was Carol's voice echoing in my head. Adrian, at the preschool? But he told me he was out of town on business. And just like that, my heart sank. The cake box in my hand crumpled slightly from my grip. He lied to me. He hadn't gone anywhere. He went to get Ben himself. Meanwhile, I stood outside their door, frozen, waiting like a fool. He'd known I was coming. And still he said nothing. Left me out in the cold. Literally. Why lie to me? Why shut me out like I was some intrusive stranger? The wind picked up again, this time fierce and sharp, making my face sting. The cake felt suddenly heavier, like it was pressing down on my chest. My thoughts tumbled in every direction until one settled hard in the pit of my stomach. The one I didn't want to admit. They didn't want me there. Not just today. Not anymore. It was pathetic, really, how long it had taken me to see that. On the walk home, everything felt fuzzy, like I was moving through fog. At the corner, I heard someone call my name. I looked up and saw Carol approaching, her face tight with concern. She stopped in front of me, hesitant. "Bridget," she said gently, "forgive me for saying this, but I've heard things. Rumors, you know. That Adrian and Caroline, they've been talking for a while about wanting more space. Less interference." I gave her a strained smile. "Thanks, Carol. I think I'm starting to get the message." She looked down, her voice lowering. "It's more than that. Word is, they're planning to sell the house. The one you gave them. It's already listed with a broker." My legs buckled slightly. That house. That house was the one my husband and I scrimped and saved for in our younger years. It was supposed to be our retirement security. When Adrian got married, he said the place he bought felt too small, that the mortgage was stretching them thin. I gave him the house, free and clear, thinking it would help them breathe easier. I moved into a subsidized senior unit, barely 180 square feet. Just a bed and a tiny table. It was tight, but I didn't complain. I thought I was helping my family. But now, they were selling it? Without telling me. It felt like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. Every nerve went numb. They weren't just setting boundaries. They wanted me gone. Completely. When I got back to my cramped but spotless apartment, the first thing I did was call the bank and suspend the monthly transfers I'd been sending to Adrian. Every month, a portion of my pension went to help him with the mortgage, because he said things were tight and I couldn't stand to see him stressed. But now, no more. The next morning, I went to the property records office to check the house's status. Sure enough, it was listed. I held the printed listing in my trembling hands and took a long breath before pulling out my phone. I texted Adrian a single sentence. "We need to talk about the house." He called back within 5 minutes. His tone was, as always, cool and clipped. "Mom, the house is mine now. Why are you so worried about it?" I kept my voice even firm. "That house was your father's legacy. I gave it to you because you needed help. If you're selling it, the least you can do is involve me in that decision." He laughed dryly. "Mom, come on. You're living fine, aren't you? Selling it helps us. It helps Ben. Why make this harder than it has to be?" I replied calmly, "This isn't me making it hard. This is me finally stopping the act." The call ended there, with tension so thick you could feel it through the phone. Adrian didn't understand why I was upset. Maybe he never would. In his mind, the ideal mother was someone who showed up only when asked, and disappeared the moment she was inconvenient. Someone who could vanish when she was embarrassing and reappear when money got tight. But I'm done with that. I'm done being invisible and useful only when it suits them. That night I barely slept a wink. It wasn't the wind that kept me up. It was the cold inside. The radiator buzzed steadily in the corner, but I felt like I was curled up in a hollow shell, getting colder with every hour. My eyes were closed, but my mind wouldn't stop. The photo of Ben hung just above my bed. He was grinning so brightly in it. And yet today I didn't even get to see that smile. I kept replaying Adrian's voice on the phone, distant, impatient, and that one line I couldn't shake. "Mom, stop calling me. You're really bothering us." A bother? After all those years I stayed up with him through fevers in the ear, after watching him take his first steps into adulthood, after worrying myself sick over him for decades. Now I was just an inconvenience? Before the sun came up, I sat up in bed, walked into the kitchen and brewed a cup of black coffee. While it cooled in my hands, I opened the drawer and pulled out a copy of the property gift agreement. I could hardly remember what I was thinking when I signed it, only that he'd said the mortgage was killing them and he needed help. I didn't ask questions. I handed over the deed to the house my husband and I had scrimped and saved for together. I didn't even get a lawyer. I just trusted him. By the time the coffee went cold, I'd made up my mind. At 7 sharp, I slipped on my trench coat and headed toward the library. In my bag were 2 things: the signed agreement and a printed copy of the real estate listing I'd pulled up the night before. Inside the library's old brick building was a community legal aid office. Every Wednesday, a retired lawyer volunteered to help folks like me, low-income seniors, navigate the system. When I arrived, a line had already formed. Elderly men and women in heavy coats clutched folders or stared down at their shoes. I quietly joined the line, my heart too tangled to describe. When it was my turn, a tired-looking woman with red-framed glasses greeted me at the front desk. She had a gentle tone despite the dark circles under her eyes. "Hi there. What kind of issue are you needing help with?" "It's about a gifted family property," I murmured. I might need some guidance." She nodded. "Do you have the documents with you?" I handed over the agreement and the listing. She skimmed them, her eyes pausing slightly mid-read. "Come with me," she said. "You'll want to speak to Helen." Helen Porter. I'd heard the name from neighbors before. She used to specialize in family asset and eldercare disputes. Now she volunteered as a community legal advisor. Her hair was a soft white, curled just enough to frame her face. The lines around her eyes told stories of patience, not weariness. "You're Bridget, right?" she asked. "Can you tell me a bit about what's going on?" I told her everything, about gifting the house, about Adrian and Caroline shutting me out, and how they had listed the property for sale without saying a word. She flipped through the paperwork, skimming slowly. "This agreement, yes, it's official. The property title is under your son's name now." I bit my lip and nodded. "But here," she pointed to a fine line of print with her pen, "this part's vague but important. This gift is provided for family support purposes. Any sale requires prior knowledge and written consent of the original grantor. This gives you a foothold." My eyes widened. "So, I can stop them from selling it?" "You can try," she replied, setting the pen down and meeting my eyes. "You can file for an emergency injunction on the grounds that the sale violates the intended use of the gift. At the very least, it'll delay the process until you can argue your case." My heart beat faster, like a crack had finally appeared in the wall that had been pressing down on me for days. "But, if Adrian and Caroline find out I did this, won't it make things worse between us?" Even now, a part of me still cared. Helen paused, then softened her tone. "Bridget, ask yourself, who earned that house? You and your husband spent years saving every month, paying down that mortgage together. You gifted it out of love and trust. And they turned around and listed it behind your back. This isn't about stirring up conflict. This is about protecting yourself." Her words caught in my throat. I knew all of it, but no one had ever said it aloud. No one had ever stood beside me and told me I wasn't wrong to feel betrayed. She handed me a statement of claim form, then pulled out some sample case files from a drawer. "Take these home and review them. If you decide to move forward, I'll help you get the paperwork in order." I nodded, voice quiet. "Thank you." By the time I stepped outside, it was nearly noon. The sun was out, but it gave off no warmth. I sat on the bench in front of the library, looking down at a photo of Ben on my phone. His smile was as sweet as ever, but behind that smile were 2 parents who saw me as nothing but a burden, someone to be pushed aside, dealt with quietly. Across the street, a row of red brick houses lined the sidewalk. And in that moment, something inside me crystallized. This wasn't about fighting over a house. It was about not letting them decide whether I had value. This time I wasn't lashing out. I was protecting myself. After speaking with the legal clinic about the house, I found myself going out less and less. It wasn't just the weather, it was the weight in my chest. The kind that made it hard to face people. Deep down, I think I was afraid of running into someone who might say something else that would split me open all over again. But life has its own way of dragging you back into the world. It was Friday evening and I had just come downstairs to check the mail when I bumped into Carol. She was holding her grandson's hand, heading home. The little boy bounced along happily, gripping a bunch of colorful balloons. But when she spotted me, the smile on her face faltered. "Bridget," she said gently, her voice laced with hesitation, "how have you been holding up?" I nodded and forced a calm tone. I'm all right. Just keeping indoors. Too cold lately. She glanced at me, then down at her grandson. Why don't you run across to the park for a few minutes? She told him softly, watching him skip away before turning back to me. I knew that look. We older women, there's a kind of unspoken understanding between us. A quiet intuition when someone needs to talk. Sure enough, once I was close enough, she lowered her voice. I heard something, she began. Just from around the neighborhood. I wasn't sure if you'd want to know. I let out a dry little laugh. At this point, I don't think I can hurt more than I already have. Go ahead. Carol sighed. It's about that day. The birthday cake. A few folks saw you waiting at the door. You standing there like that, it really hit people. Later, one of the neighbors passed by Adrian's house and overheard some voices in the yard. They were saying how you're always showing up, interfering, like you're some old woman who doesn't know how to let go. That you're a burden. In that moment, it felt like thunder cracked in my ears. Not because I was surprised, but because the wound I thought had scabbed over was still bleeding, and now someone had pulled the bandage right off. I stood there, silent. Carol looked at me carefully, and when she spoke again, her voice was even softer. But we all know what you've done for them. Around here, nothing stays hidden long. We know who helped who moved away, who stepped in when someone needed it. And Bridget, everyone knows how much you've given. I pressed my lips together, fighting the sting rising behind my eyes. Thank you for telling me, Carol. Honestly, maybe it's time I stop pretending I don't see it. She reached out and gave my shoulder a gentle pat. Bridget, it's not that you weren't needed. It's that they don't deserve you. And just like that, something inside me cracked open. A shaft of light cutting through the fog. He was right. It wasn't that I had no value. It was that they no longer deserved the sacrifices I'd been making. The next day I called Adrian and asked if we could meet. To my surprise, he didn't deflect, he just suggested we talk at a coffee shop somewhere public. I chose a chain spot near his office and arrived 10 minutes early. I ordered his usual black coffee, out of habit more than anything. For all I knew, his preferences had changed. But some parts of me hadn't caught up yet. When he walked in and spotted me, he froze for a beat. Like he wasn't expecting me to look so composed. Mom, he said cautiously, his voice etched with wariness. I handed him the coffee. I'm not here to argue, I said evenly. Just to talk. He took the cup without a word and sat across from me. I reached into my bag and laid 2 documents on the table. The listing for the house and the property gift agreement. I know you and Caroline are planning to sell the house, I said. His jaw tightened. His fingers began to trace nervous circles along the rim of his cup. Mom, that house is legally mine. You signed it over. You knew what that meant. I nodded. I did. I gave it to you. But you also know there's a clause in that agreement. It says any sale must be disclosed and approved by the grantor. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then muttered under his breath, Caroline said you wouldn't care. I looked him dead in the eye. Do you really think a mother who gave away her last home, who lives alone in a subsidized apartment, wouldn't care what happens to the house she built her life around? He didn't answer. I pressed on. I've never wanted to hold you back from living a good life. But that doesn't mean I'll accept being completely shut out. I will not have everything I've given reduced to being an inconvenient burden. He looked up at me then. And for a moment I saw something flash across his face. Guilt, maybe. But it vanished quickly, tucked behind the same guarded expression. Mom, we didn't mean it like that. Things have just been tight lately. The mortgage, Ben's school expenses. We're just trying to ease the pressure. I gave a small dry laugh. I know life's not easy for you. But have you ever stopped to think that I'm 66, living alone on a fixed income? I'm not made of steel. You've leaned on my support for years, financially, emotionally, and the second it's inconvenient, I'm left standing out in the cold. That's not easing pressure. That's betrayal. His face stiffened. His lips parted, but no words came out. I stood up. My voice was steady but clear. This isn't over. I've spoken with a lawyer. That house can't be sold without my consent. So unless you get my signature, don't expect to see a single dollar come out of it. And with that I turned and walked out. My reflection in the cafe window showed a straight spine, a woman standing firm. I didn't go home right away. I sat on a bench down the block, letting the city move around me. Sunlight poured through the narrow gap between office towers, lighting up the paper in my hand. A copy of the property injunction request I had signed earlier. I planned to file it officially next week. This was only the beginning. I didn't expect Adrian to suddenly change, or for Caroline to grow a conscience overnight. But I had finally learned something. Family does not give anyone the right to drain you dry. I am a mother. But before that, I am me. A few days later, I walked into the community legal aid office with a full stack of documents in my hands. Helen looked up and gave me a small nod. Ready? I handed her each page one by one. My voice was calm, resolute. I'm ready. She carefully reviewed the documents, checking each date, signature, and line for compliance. Once she was satisfied, she folded her hands and spoke gently, "We'll file for the emergency injunction today. The judge typically issues an initial response within 48 hours. If approved, the property will be temporarily locked from any transactions." I nodded. My chest still felt tight, but not like it had a few weeks ago. I wasn't drowning anymore. Helen slid a copy of the filing across the desk. "Bridget, once they receive the order, they're probably going to show up at your door. You need to be prepared for that." "I am," I said again. Even I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. That afternoon, just past 2 o'clock, I was in the kitchen making tea when the doorbell rang. I glanced through the peephole. Adrian and Caroline. I didn't hesitate long before opening the door. They stood there, their expressions tight. Adrian tried to sound composed. "Can we come in and talk?" I stepped aside and let them in. The apartment was small, barely room for a kitchen and a dining table by the door. They sat near the sofa. I stayed across from them, holding my tea, saying nothing. I waited. Caroline spoke first. "Bridget, we got the notice from the court. You froze the property sale." I didn't answer. Just looked at her, letting the silence be its own confirmation. Adrian sighed, already on edge. "Mom, why are you doing this? You said yourself, you gave us the house." I slowly set my cup down. "I did. But I also left protection in place. That agreement clearly states any sale requires my consent. You both knew that. And yet you tried to sell it behind my back, without a single phone call. Tell me, Adrian, does that feel like respect to you?" Caroline jumped in, defensive. "It wasn't meant like that. You just thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you?" I cut her off. "Thought I was old, agreeable, wouldn't make a fuss. So you could keep taking and I'd keep quiet." Adrian's face darkened. He shifted in his seat, jaw clenched, but said nothing. I turned to Caroline. "You've never liked me. I've known that for a long time. You think the way I live, the way I talk makes you uncomfortable. That I overstep. That I meddle. But tell me, when you couldn't find a nanny after Ben was born, who was there within the hour? Who dipped into her retirement savings to help with your mortgage? Who took a step back the moment you said, 'We've got it from here,' and never walked through your door again?" The room went quiet. For the first time, there was something vulnerable in Caroline's eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Adrian finally spoke. "Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. It's just, everything's tight. The tuition, the loans. We thought." I looked at him, my voice softer now, but firm. "I know things are hard. But you can't turn me into your solution. I'm not your aim. I'm not your backup plan. I'm 66 years old, Adrian. I'm not giving the rest of my life to people who treat me like I'm disposable." He looked down, silent again, like a boy caught doing something wrong. But Caroline wasn't ready to back down. "We did think about your feelings. You just take everything so personally. You always think we're trying to exclude you." I gave a short, bitter laugh. "Caroline, I stood outside your door with Ben's favorite cake. I called over a dozen times. You didn't answer. Adrian told me he was out of town. Then the next day I find out he was at Ben's school pickup. Do you really think I'm just imagining things?" She bit her lip and said nothing. Adrian lifted his head. "So, what happens now?" I looked him in the eye. My voice was low, but it rang with something clear and unshakable. "I'm not here to ruin your life. But I will fight for my place in it. If you want peace, you learn respect. Otherwise, believe me, I won't back down." They left without another word. When the door closed behind them, I leaned back in my chair and shut my eyes, letting out a long, slow breath. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped being the kind of mother who was afraid to speak up. For years, I held this family together with nothing but patience and softness. Now I was finally learning how to protect myself, with sharpness if I had to. Early Monday morning, I handed the stack of documents over at the civil intake window of the courthouse. Behind the counter was a blonde clerk with cobalt blue nail polish. She moved slowly but with a quiet confidence. She skimmed through my paperwork, then double-checked the application form I'd filled out. "You're contesting the sale based on an attached clause, correct?" she asked without looking up. I nodded. The gift agreement explicitly states that any sale requires the grantor's knowledge and written consent. I was neither informed nor did I sign anything. She glanced up at me briefly, then returned to the papers. She didn't press with questions, just said plainly, "You'll be notified within 72 hours whether the case is accepted. If it moves forward, a preliminary hearing will be scheduled." I accepted the receipt and stood there in the courthouse lobby feeling strangely lighter. Not because I was confident I'd win, but because I had finally taken the first real step. Bridget Dawson, was no longer the mother who always quietly backed down. That afternoon, I planned to stop by the grocery store to pick up laundry detergent. As I passed the convenience store near Ben's school, just about to go inside, I heard a high, sweet voice call out, "Nana." I froze, turned around, and there he was, Ben, standing just outside the school gate with his backpack slung over his shoulders, his eyes bright as stars. The teacher beside him must have picked up on our connection. She gave me a nod and walked away. I rushed over, crouching down and wrapping my arms around him. He leapt into my hug, wrapping himself around me, warm and sweet-smelling like childhood itself. "What are you doing here?" he giggled, pressing his cheek to mine. I stroked his hair, fighting back the wave of emotion. "Just walking by, sweetheart. I saw you and had to say hi." He laughed, then dug around in his backpack and pulled out a wrinkled piece of construction paper. "I drew your favorite flower today. Look." The picture was a wobbly, vivid bunch of pink carnations, colored with intense scribbles. At the top, in lopsided letters, he had written, "To Nana." My throat tightened. My eyes burned. But I didn't cry. I cupped his little face and whispered, "Ben, thank you. I'll keep this picture forever." He looked up at me seriously. "How come you don't come over anymore?" I hesitated, then said gently, "Nana's been busy lately. But once I finish what I'm working on, I'll come see you." "Okay." He nodded obediently. "You have to come soon. I made lots of drawings for you." I ruffled his hair and smiled, trying to keep it light. "Better head home now. Don't keep your teacher waiting." I watched him go, standing there in the narrow alley beside the school, feeling completely hollowed out. God, how I wanted to scoop him up and take him home, make him hot cocoa like I used to, cut paper animals with him, read him bedtime stories. But I couldn't. Because I knew I couldn't let this legal mess touch him. He was a child. He deserved clean love and a life that felt safe. This fight, it was between me and his parents. It had nothing to do with Ben. Still, in that moment I made a quiet vow to myself. Even if I could no longer be the grandmother who was there every day, I would never let him see me as someone who shrank away. I wanted him to know that his Nana wasn't a burden to be tossed aside. She was someone with dignity. With strength. When I got home, I placed the drawing in the bottom drawer of my desk, right next to an old photo of me and Adrian when he was just a boy. Then I opened my laptop and sent Helen an email letting her know the documents had been officially submitted. She replied almost instantly. "Well done, Bridget. I'll let you know when it's time to send notice to the opposing counsel." I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "Thank you. I'm ready for whatever comes next." And I meant it. For so long, I'd tried to earn a place in my family through silence and sacrifice. But now I was learning to hold that place with my voice. This wasn't just about a house. It was about protecting the rest of my life. A week later, on a quiet afternoon, the court's official ruling landed in my inbox. I opened the PDF, heart pounding in my chest, eyes darting down line after line, until I found it. The court has determined that the case warrants judicial review. Therefore, a preliminary injunction is hereby issued. The property in question shall be frozen throughout the litigation process. Any attempt at sale, mortgage, or transfer is deemed invalid. I stared at the screen in silence until my vision blurred and my eyes welled up. I knew this wasn't the end of the case. But it was the first real acknowledgement, an authoritative voice saying, "You're not being petty. You're standing up for what's yours." The next morning Helen called. Bridget, you nailed it, she said, her voice carrying a rare note of cheer. Your agreement may have been simple, but it saved you. The judge acknowledged your interpretation of the gifting clause and agreed that, ethically, this sale raises serious concerns. I held the phone tightly, trying to stay composed. So, does that mean the house is frozen? For now, yes. She paused. But more importantly, this sends a clear message. You're not someone who can be brushed aside anymore. Then she added, the judge is also recommending we attempt mediation. They may offer you a settlement in exchange for lifting the freeze. Are you open to hearing them out? I was quiet for a moment. It wasn't that I didn't want compensation, I just didn't want it handed down like hush money. I said softly, I'm willing to listen. But not in a rush. Let them sit with what they've done for a while. And sit they did. 2 days later, Carol caught me in the produce aisle of the grocery store we both frequented. I saw Caroline in the parking lot, she said, eyes wide. Red in the face, on the phone with someone, yelling about how the loan didn't go through, and blaming you for messing everything up. I nodded, didn't say a word. I could guess what was happening. They were counting on selling the house to fill a financial gap. Maybe for Ben's tuition, maybe to upgrade their home. But now with the freeze in place, they were stuck. Like a snake caught by the tail, furious but powerless. Carol leaned in closer. She said you were being cold-hearted, putting them through this. I just gave a small shake of my head. I no longer needed Caroline's understanding to feel at peace. I had found something far more important. I had proven to myself that I could live on my own terms. And as for Adrian, the day he received the official notice from my lawyer, he came home and barely said a word. Caroline was pacing the living room. She needs to back off. She should have known better than to get involved again. Adrian sat down, rubbed his temples. Then quietly said, she didn't do anything wrong. She's held back for years. For us. Caroline stopped mid-step. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what I mean, he said, his voice strained. We've taken so much from her. What have we ever really given back? Maybe, just maybe, it was the first time they were really arguing over me. Not my money. Not the house. Me. I didn't show up to gloat. I didn't twist the knife. Instead, I did something I'd been putting off for years. Something I'd always wanted to do, but had kept postponing in the name of putting family first. I signed up for a community gardening class. It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon. I tied on an apron, trowel in hand, and stood alongside a group of older women as we planted roses, transplanted bellflowers, and traded tips on soil and sun exposure. Someone brought coffee. Someone else passed around homemade cookies. And for the first time in a long while, I felt it. Life expanding beyond the orbit of Adrian and his little household. Could make friends. I could tell stories from when I was young. I could fret about a lopsided Snapdragon instead of a monthly auto-transfer that drained my account. The neighbors knew what I'd been through. No one pried. No one whispered. Instead, they supported me in quiet, practical ways. Like introducing me to a local floral studio looking for part-time help, saying it could be a nice way to monetize all that talent. I laughed and waved it off. These hands are a little too old for that. But someone just smiled and said, you've just forgotten how to live for yourself. Adrian hadn't reached out. Not directly. But Carol did mention seeing him one day sitting alone on the courthouse steps. She said his eyes were rimmed red like he'd just been chewed out, or maybe just cried. I didn't respond. It's not that I didn't feel for him. He's my son. I raised him. But sympathy doesn't mean I'll lie down and let him walk over me again. That weekend, I sat by the living room window trimming rose stems while an old radio show hummed in the background. The soft rhythm of the shears matched the slow hush of the evening light. Then the phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated before picking up. Mom. The voice on the other end was low, hoarse. I didn't speak. He waited a beat, then went on. I know we were wrong. Caroline kept saying she wanted more. More security, a better life. She said if we just sold your house, we'd have a big cushion. And I let myself believe that. We took everything you gave us and acted like it was owed. My voice came quietly. And you forgot that love, even a mother's, needs to be respected. Needs to be seen. There was a pause. Then he said, I've spoken to our lawyer. I'm wiring you a compensation amount. It's not everything, I know, but it's a start. We won't touch the house again. The deed will just stay as is. You can decide what happens to it whenever you want. Silence stretched for a moment. I didn't hang up. I just said softly, Adrian, if you're serious about changing, then start with respect. The rest, we'll see. A quiet, okay, came through the line. Then the call ended. I leaned back in my chair, the phone still warm in my hand. Outside, the sky had deepened to that soft indigo between day and night. This wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. But it was something else. Something better. I had found my place again, not as a pawn in someone else's plan. Not as the always giving, never seen mother figure. I was Bridget Dawson. Retired. Alive. Capable. Boundaried. I had won the case. But more importantly, I had won myself back. A month later, spring finally arrived. On my windowsill, the first hyacinth bloomed, a soft violet blossom gently pushing through a cluster of green leaves. It felt like a long-awaited breath, a quiet exhale after holding in the cold for too long. That morning, I received a text from the bank. Adrian had transferred me a sum, not large, but considering their current situation, it was a clear gesture. In the memo line, he'd written only 4 words. Compensation. I'm sorry. After reviewing the details, Helen said, you can treat this as partial emotional damages or, if you're ready, as the basis for a settlement. If you choose, we can drop further litigation at the next hearing. I nodded slowly. I'd never intended to reclaim the house just to sell it. It might not ever be returned to my name in full, but I'd secured something far more valuable. The assurance that I'd never be left without a roof over my head again. I notified Adrian and Caroline that they could retain the title for now, but from here on, any future sale would require my explicit written approval. Without my signature, not a single brick could be touched. All of it was put into a formal memorandum of understanding and filed in the court's electronic system. I kept a printed copy for myself, a key to a lock I no longer feared. With the housing dispute behind me, my life finally settled back into a gentle rhythm. Ben had been calling more often. I had a feeling his parents were no longer actively discouraging our contact. Nana, he beamed on a recent video call, holding up a picture book. Did you know whales sing at night? I laughed while pouring myself a glass of water. Well then, next time you'll have to read it to me, okay? Okay, he nodded fiercely. Then he leaned in close to the camera and whispered, Mom said you're moving again. Are you taking the flower picture I made for you? The carnations. My nose tingled with warmth. I nodded. Of course I am. I'm even getting it framed. After the call ended, I stood in the middle of my nearly empty apartment. Just walls and echoes now. This place had been my rock bottom but also my awakening. And now it was time to turn the page. Adrian really was trying to repair what was left between us. Beyond the money, he'd also helped me get in touch with a senior-friendly living community on the west side of town. The units were designed for independent living with basic support services. The one I chose had a spacious balcony and a raised garden bench for planting. I planned to bring the hyacinths with me along with my stubborn little succulents that had never quite thrived, but hadn't died either. As for the old house, after discussing it with Adrian and Caroline, we rented it out. Helen helped us through the process. It's now home to a young couple, both nurses. The rent isn't much, but it's enough. Adrian and I agreed to split it 50-50. That income gives me peace of mind and independence. On moving day, I didn't tell Adrian, but somehow Ben knew anyway. He called, his screen shaking as he waved the phone around. Nana, can I visit your new home? I smiled. If your mom says yes, you're always welcome. I'll make them call you, he said seriously. A few days later, Adrian did text. Mom, if it's okay, I'd like to bring Ben by to see your new place. I replied simply. Ben is always welcome. If you have time, you can come too, for a cup of tea. That first night in my new home, I made myself a pot of chamomile tea and opened the windows to let the spring breeze in. The corner lamp cast a warm yellow glow on the wall. I sat in a brand new wicker chair with Ben's drawing beside me, a poetry book on my lap, and a flyer for next week's volunteer recruitment at the community gardening club on the table. For once, my life wasn't about waiting for someone to call. And it certainly wasn't about fearing the silence when they didn't. I finally understood. Starting over doesn't require something loud or dramatic. It's a quiet unfolding. A slow reclaiming of yourself. It begins with no longer trying to stay relevant in someone else's story, and continues with writing your own. With not waiting to be loved, but learning to love yourself, deeply and intentionally. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. All my life, I'd believed that being a mother was my entire identity. But now I knew the truth. Even mothers, especially mothers, have the right to choose the life that belongs to them. Outside, the hyacinth swayed in the breeze, as if it were applauding.
My name is Adrian Dawson. I'm 36 years old. To most people, I probably look like the worst kind of son, the kind who was raised by a single mother and then ended up taking her to court over a house. But if you're willing to hear me out, maybe you'll understand that everything didn't fall apart overnight. When I was a kid, I was really close to my mom. My dad passed away early, and it was just the two of us. She worked as an accountant for a government office, always in that same slate blue uniform, carrying a lunchbox to and from work. My favorite part of the day was when she got home and started cooking dinner, asking, "Did anyone give you trouble at school today?" "Nope," I always said, even if it wasn't true. She'd smile and say, "Good. You're the most important thing in my life. I need to know you're okay." Back then, I truly believed she was the warmest presence in the whole world. Even after I moved out for college, she kept calling every week, asking if I needed anything: groceries, socks, batteries. Every time I came home, she'd have a pot of my favorite tomato braised beef stew on the stove. "Your dad loved this," she'd say. "And it was your favorite when you were little. When you take a bite, it feels like this house still has a heartbeat." I was touched every time, and I never stopped wanting to repay her. But life got complicated, and so did I. I met Caroline not long after graduation. She was smart, decisive, driven, a fast riser in the insurance world. I was drawn to the way she seemed to always have a plan. She made me feel like I was finally stepping into adulthood with direction and control. We got married pretty quickly. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom I bought with a mortgage. At first, everything felt manageable. But when Ben was born, things started to shift. My mom was overjoyed, naturally. And her joy came with offers. "Do you want me to watch the baby for a few hours? I can come by in the evenings and cook. Let me help out on the weekends with laundry or cleaning." She meant well. I knew that. But to Caroline, it felt like an invasion. "She has no boundaries, Adrian," she'd say. "She calls it helping, but she's interfering. Have you even thought about how we're supposed to build our own family if she's always right there?" I didn't agree at first. But she repeated it so many times that eventually, I started to believe it. One night stands out. My mom had made dinner for us, nothing fancy, just a surprise visit. I forgot to tell Caroline. When she walked in and saw my mom there, her face just dropped. Later, at dinner, my mom casually suggested, "Maybe move Ben's high chair closer to the wall. He keeps dropping food." That was it. Caroline went silent. 2 days of cold shoulders followed. "You never take our side," she finally snapped. "Your mom's always stepping in, and you let her. Do you even see it?" That night, I had my first real thought. Is Mom doing too much? After that, our interactions with her became controlled. Every visit had a time limit. We stopped complimenting her cooking. When she offered to watch Ben, we said, "No thanks, we've hired help." And the money, her monthly bank transfer to help with the mortgage, I never acknowledged it again. I knew she felt it. The coldness. I knew she was pulling back, trying to stay out of the way. But I didn't realize how far we'd pushed her away, until it was too late. The house. That was Caroline's idea. "Adrian, we're drowning in bills. The mortgage, the car loan, it's too much. That house your mom gave you, it's just sitting there. We should sell it. She already signed it over to you. We just need to authorize a sale. That's all." I hesitated. It bothered me, knowing she was in that tiny subsidized apartment, no balcony, no space. But Caroline pressed harder. She said she was fine, didn't she? She said we should make our own decisions, right? So stop waiting for her approval. And I took the coward's way out. I said nothing, which was as good as saying yes. I told myself she'd never notice. Or if she did, she wouldn't fight it. She wasn't the type to go to war with her own son. That's what I told myself. Then the court notice arrived. A formal injunction. I stood there holding the paper, and it hit me. She wasn't weak. She was done being quiet. I can't forget the moment we stood in that cramped little kitchen of hers, when she looked me in the eye and said, "I'm 66 years old. I can't give the rest of my life to people who don't know how to care for me." In that instant, for the first time, I truly felt ashamed. Not because she had frozen the sale of the house, but because I was the one who pushed her into a corner where she had no choice but to pick up a weapon just to defend herself. For the next few weeks, I barely slept. Old memories kept rising in the silence. Her running with me through snow to get to the clinic, my face pressed against her wind-chapped neck. Her sitting beside me late at night helping with homework, forgetting to pack her own lunch for the next day. Her waving a paycheck in the air, beaming, saying, "Next month, we can get you that new computer." I'd told her so many times as a kid, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you." But I never followed through. Not once. I don't blame Caroline. She isn't a bad person. She just wanted to protect her version of life. The real issue was me, too passive, too weak, too silent between the two women who shaped my world. Eventually, I transferred a sum of money to my mom. It wasn't much, but it was a gesture, an acknowledgement. I also went to visit the new community she'd moved into. It was bright and peaceful, with sunlight spilling across her balcony where she'd already started growing flowers. One day, when I stopped by to drop off a picture book for Ben, she brought out tea and smiled. "Remember when you used to lie on the balcony in the sun reading? You got so sunburned you peeled for a week." I laughed, nodded, but something tugged deep in my chest. I know things between us might never go back to the way they were. But one thing is certain. I'll never again let anyone call her unnecessary. Because she isn't. She is, and always has been, the very first place I ever learned what love feels like.